this looks like a good point for us to go ahead and get started. So I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar about the rise of citizen developers in higher education and the role they play in an institution's digital transformation. A few housekeeping items before we kick things off. This session is being recorded. All attendees are on mute. So if you do have a question, we have a Q&A feature down at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll notice an area where you can enter your questions, and I'll be actively monitoring those as they come in. So yeah, feel free to type questions as they come to mind, and we'll do our best to tackle them. With us today, we've got Krista O'Brien from the University of Connecticut. We're real excited to have her here this morning with us to be sharing her experience. Krista is the Associate Director of Student Activities and Director for the Trustee Student Organization Support at the University of Connecticut. With us as well is our Executive Vice President of Marketing and Sales Enablement. My good friend Casey Foster is with us this morning, and she'll help lead the conversation with Krista. And that's it for housekeeping. Casey, have a great webinar. I'll go ahead and hand things off to you now.
Thank you so much. Thanks, and welcome everyone. So excited to see the level of engagement and the interest in this topic. I'll make sure we spend a lot of time getting to know Krista in a little bit. But before we dive into our conversation, I would just want to give a little bit of information about Koali as a company and about our build product. Many of you who are joining us today are already familiar with us. But if you're new to our webinar series, maybe this is the first time you're learning about Koali, I just want to make sure you're grounded in who we are as a company and our build product that we're going to be talking about today. At Koali, our goal is to make amazing software for higher education. And the way we do that is rooted in our community model. We want to be in conversation with our user community about how we can solve real problems happening in higher ed. And that's something that's very important to us. We are here today to talk about our build product, but I want to orient you to the fact that Koali does make software to solve problems in several different areas of higher ed. We have an enterprise financials product. We have a business continuity planning product called Koali Ready. We have a research administration and compliance suite, Koali Research. We have a curriculum management and catalog management suite called Koali Student. And then we have our build product, which is designed to empower departments across all of these spaces and many more. We think we bring together a couple of unique things in terms of the experience we offer you. First of all, we've got a strong focus on and passion about the user experience and how we design software. We have a very modern approach to software development. We are SaaS native, we are continuous delivery, and we've got a number of other development practices that we're very proud of that ensure we have a really modern approach to software design. And as I've already mentioned, we've got our strong, engaged community that we're in conversation with, folks in conversation with each other. And that's really kind of the Koali experience. So Koali Build is the software that we're going to be talking about today as part of our conversation about citizen developers and digital transformation. Out there on campus, you've got folks who have processes that they need to support. Right now, they're doing that potentially with PDFs that are being emailed around, with Google Forms, with a variety of tools that maybe on the one hand are easy to get started with. They might be inexpensive, they don't need engineering help, but they don't always meet business requirements and they're not always secure. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got solutions that are much heavier in the sense that they might be custom code development on campus. They might be vended applications that are expensive, that require significant engineering involvement to use. And none of those choices ends up being optimal, but Koali Build is in a sweet spot. It's easy to use for folks on campus, and part of the story we're going to hear today is about that kind of ease of use and the power of the product to transform how things are working. But it's also very powerful. So it's an appealing combination, something that we're really excited about. The product's designed to enable IT to safely increase their capacity to deliver solutions by empowering departments to create their own forms and workflow. And that's where the concept of the citizen developer comes into play. But I think it's important to note that in this context, the folks we're talking about aren't developers in the traditional sense at all. They're far more citizen than developer. And I think that's what makes the story really fun. Some quick fun stats about how Build is scaling on campus. We now have more than 10,000, nearly 10,500 applications that have been created in Koali Build. In the last 30 days alone, more than 84,000 form submissions. And in total, we're approaching the 2 million mark of form submissions. So it's really exciting to see Build grow and spread and how many processes we're automating on campus. Fun leaderboard of our top submitters. You'll see lots of different types of institutions are able to use Koali Build and get value from that product and that experience. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I am super excited about this conversation because in our webinar series, we've had a lot of opportunity to talk with folks in IT about how the tool is helping them roll out digital transformation on campus. But today we're talking to someone in the business unit who is really one of those non-traditional developers, citizen developers. So Krista, over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your role, who you are, what you're responsible for on campus?
Sure, yes, thanks, Casey. So again, my name is Krista O'Brien. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an associate director of student activities at the University of Connecticut. And director of trustee student organization support, which means that I have a team of folks. There's 8 of us who support the fee-funded student organizations on campus. So student government, both undergraduate and graduate, and our student media groups, a newspaper, a radio station, a television station, and a yearbook. And our staff's job is both leadership and organizational development. So we serve as their advisors and support these students who are supervising their peers, maybe for the first time, learning how to run organizations, developing their own leadership philosophy and their capacity and skills to do that effectively. And we also serve as the fiscal compliance officers for the student fee money that they take in. So every undergraduate or graduate student here on the Storrs campus of UConn pay a certain amount of fees to each of these organizations, along with the other fees they pay to attend UConn. And this money has to be spent in accordance with state policy, university policy, federal policy. And it's my job and the rest of my staff's job to make sure that the money is spent in accordance with those policies. And then we actually do the purchasing for those groups. Our student organizations don't have their own credit cards. They're not using their own travel cards. They're not dealing in cash. We're using university systems, including KFS, Koali Financial System, to make these purchases, to pay vendors for everything from t-shirts to mics for the radio station, to artists to come play concerts. We're printing the Daily Campus. Our student newspaper still prints 5 days a week, physical paper copies. And so we have to help them manage that, along with student payroll and student labor. So we have accounts receivable, accounts payable, and all of the challenges that come with students being our clients, customers, the people we're there to support. And obviously in student activities, we manage not only student organizations, but leadership development, fraternities and sorority life, as well as community outreach opportunities that all of my staff are a part of.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. You're really kind of at a key juncture of the student experience.
Yes, I think that student activities is one of the most important co-curricular or extracurricular opportunities for a student in college, both undergraduate and graduate. Student activities is really the community outside of the classroom and the ways that students engage with those things. We're maybe not the top billing of a university or why you come is to get the degree, but the whole entire collegiate experience touches student activities in some way, shape, or form.
And I love your point too about how part of what you're doing is helping students develop their own ability to be leaders. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit about kind of the state of things before you began using Koali Build. What were some of the challenges that you were facing?
Right. So as I mentioned before, the staff and I that support these organizations. We manage their purchases and all their expenses. And really prior to the pandemic, that process was largely paper. So we had PDFs or Word documents that students would download, fill out. Usually, they would type things out. Sometimes people would actually print them out and write into them. They would download other documentation, quotes from vendors, or screenshots of an Amazon wish list, or a contract with a particular artist. And they would attach that along with a list of attendees that they made in Word or Excel, and an agenda of the meeting, minutes from the meeting that they voted on these expenses. These could be 50 to 100 page paper packets that they would stick in a color-coded folder and drop off at our office from wherever they were, either the floor above or below us, or the Daly campus, which is totally across our large campus on the other side of the main road. And they have to come and drop it off, and our staff would review it on paper, make notes in the margins, send it back if it needed to be fixed. We were a totally paper shop, and we knew that we needed to get to an electronic solution, but we never really had the time during the school year to manage these things. We were working with 7 different organizations. We had a significant number of financial staff supporting them. At the time, we had about 10 folks that their sole job was to do the financial compliance and the purchasing. Then the pandemic happened, and like many others, we were sent home to work from our homes. We weren't on campus for an entire year, and we obviously can't mail things to each other. That really wasn't the solution. We had to pivot really quickly to some sort of online intake system. What we had available to us included Aurora WordPress, which is where our websites are located, and creating some forms in there, or a student organization management system software that we already have and we still use here at UConn. We chose the latter because that's where our student organizations were already in that space. And there was a finance module within that software that we started developing basic intake submission questions, taking our PDF forms and just duplicating those questions on that same system. So we moved away from paper. But there was a large amount of the process of actually purchasing something for groups that had to exist outside of that submission. So we received something from the group, we reviewed and approved it, and it was great to have that electronically and not having to deal with paper or wet signatures anymore. But then we created this fairly elaborate folder system and a shared network drive, so we could tell at any point in time where a purchase was in process. Was it reviewed but not purchased yet? Did we create a requisition? Did we create a purchase order? Did we actually order the thing? Have we received the thing? And are we waiting some final documentation on that? And it worked, but it wasn't great. It was better than paper for sure.
Pretty manual still though.
Yes, very much still manual, relying on staff to move those things, and not accessible or available to the students because these were on our staff networks and our students don't have that same level of access. They're using different systems altogether for their organization. So I spent not an insignificant amount of time just responding to emails of a student asking, okay, where is, those t-shirts we said we wanted to buy, or, that particular catering event, like, where is it? Are we good? Can we have those things? But we pivoted, and that's sort of what we used. And then I was introduced to Koali Build by our IT staff here at UConn. We have a fairly decentralized approach. I hopped on a Teams call with Michael. He gave me a little demo. We spent like an hour and a half kind of talking through all the different gadgets and the things the form could do, and the fact that it's a real workflow process. It's not just intake and approval. We can really track the entire process. And I sat down at I have a really large whiteboard on the other side of my office, and I drew out with my staff our process from A to Z and everything in between. And we put that into Koali Build for the start of fiscal year 23, so last year. And we have not looked back since. It is totally transformed our work. It's way more accessible to our students. I'm not answering emails about where that purchase is in process. they can log in with the document view and see their purchases and all of the steps it's in. And it's made it a lot easier for us to track the status of each request and really follow up on things to close our books a lot faster than we used to, and really be able to pull up some great reports. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm eager to hear a little more about the transformation that's taken place. But before that, you talked about mapping out your process on the whiteboard. That's such a great visual. I can picture like your staff around kind of figuring that out. What was it like translating that into the tool? Was that relatively easy to do?
Yes, I think so. And I think the way, for me at least, the way to build a form is not unlike using Aurora WordPress with the ability to do conditional logic and different sections. So I was familiar with that from managing my own website. Again, UConn has a fairly decentralized IT process. I am not an IT person, developer. My background is in student affairs and leadership development, but I can work within templates that somebody gives me. And I think I know my process better than anyone else. So I'm able to really visualize like what all the next steps should be. We did some internal testing as staff before we put it live for our students. And that's where we were able to work out really what the workflow should look like, if we needed to send something back for more information, how that can look, if we were to assign a purchase to any of our 5 staff members who purchased, building the different branches. And really, when you look at the workflow in Koali Build, it looks almost identical to the workflow we drew up on our whiteboard. So the way to be able to visualize in the workflow as a visual learner is actually really helpful for me. Something you can see that in the form itself, all the different office use sections, but when you just get a big screen and all of the workflow and the different options and branches, it's been really great to be able to visualize it in that sense.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. In your view, like, what's the time savings or the efficiency been like for your staff?
Yes, it's in some ways really hard to quantify, and the other I can actually give you some really specific numbers and data points. So in the fiscal year before we moved to Koali Build, where we were using a different system, not paper, but a different electronic system, we had processed about 580 or so purchase requests. We had 8 financial staff, and we were supporting 7 organizations. We had a couple of staff retire. We had a couple of staff move to different positions in UConn in that time. And in fiscal year 23, we did the same number of purchase requests with only 5 financial staff instead of 8. And we were supporting 6 organizations, not 7. And so we've been able to keep the same level of output, managing the same number of transactions with less staff. And so I think that points to the efficiencies gained with this process. It also seems to be more intuitive for our students to use. So there's less training that we have to do on the front end about how to do a submission. We're really just training them on all of the policies they need to follow. And the form really walks them through all of those things. If you're going to do a certain type of request, the form will then tell you all the documents we need for you to do that successfully. So I think that has helped significantly. My staff also have now time to join department committees and participate in other department things, whereas before we really felt totally flat out. I mean, I would be sitting on my couch at 9 o'clock at night combining PDFs into one big PDF, mindless work. It needed to get done. The only time I could get it done was 8 p.m., 9 p.m. We don't have to do that anymore. Staff have time to do other things, including life, which is nice.
That's great, right? That is really neat to hear that, whereas before maybe staff were engaged in activities that were important to keep things running, but now the focus can be on things that are just a better use of their professional skill set, their capabilities. It's really neat.
Yeah.
Neat to hear. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. In terms of the student experience, and you've talked a little bit about this, but it sounds like there've been some improvements there too.
Yes, some of my students now, especially our treasurers of these organizations who are now in Koali Build probably multiple times a day, submitting purchase requests or check requests or what we call payroll authorizations. They want to hire another student to a position. This is also our manual time card process. So if a student misses a payroll deadline, instead of not getting paid, we have this sort of shadow system that allows us, you know, to enter things into the university system. So they're in there all the time. I think the biggest learning curve was just bookmarking a new form as opposed to the old form that they had bookmarked. That's not a huge lift for college students these days. It's not something I had to teach anybody, how to make a bookmark or how to find this particular form. Now I know they've favorited all the forms they use often. You saw, UConn is up there and one of a, user and a significant number of submissions. So our students have learned to favorite the forms they use most often. They know exactly how to go into their action list and figure out what they need to take action on, how to find their submissions. We taught them how to create specialized views in the documents tab for each particular app that we use, so that they only have to see their organization's things, right? So I can go in here and I can see everything for WHUS, the radio station, or the undergraduate student government, without having to see what Nutmeg did or the television station. So they've learned how to do that. And I've seen them also do certain forms from their phones. Like, oh, I missed logging my hours. I'm going to pull up a manual time card right here on my phone and do it right there. So yes, they have their laptops with them all the time, but even the times when they don't, being able to do it on a mobile phone, I think has been really great for them.
Oh, that's excellent. And it sounded like you had said earlier that you're able to build instructions into the form so that students kind of get it right the first time. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. Two of our groups, the governance groups, fund other student organizations on campus. We have over 700 student organizations on the SOARS campus, and our undergraduate student government funds them. This is a way that they can take in money besides bake sales and other things. And they've been able to, they have a training that they do online that gets you access to the system, but the instructions are by and large all in this form. And they've been able to customize those instructions sort of our assistants. And as we go through things to really make sure that it's not just how many submissions they're getting, but the quality of those submissions can be better. It saves us time reviewing something that's already good than all the back and forth we used to have to try to get one piece of documentation. They can't submit it unless they've attached everything. So it saves them time for sure. They were at a point right after the pandemic when we came back to campus, the undergraduate student government was denying requests just because they didn't have capacity to review them and pay for them. This year, they're denying requests because they've run out of money. They've run out of, they set aside $700,000 and they've reached the half of that for the fall semester. And that's a much better place for them to be in than having this money saved from year to year and they're not able to spend it because they don't have capacity to do it.
That's great. That's a great outcome. And I love the way it's sort of directly related to the student experience and student success.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about just the process of adopting QualiBuild for your team. Talked a little bit about the process that you went through to decide to set up the form, but what was the learning curve like for your staff?
I don't think it was huge. There's a few of us in the team of 8 that are really building the forms, and the rest of the folks are using them to review or saving different things at the end of a process. I didn't get any significant pushback about moving to a new system because of what they saw in the system. Around the pandemic time, trying to move into another system, I did get some significant pushback back then about doing something new, sort of sense of like, if it's not broken, why are we fixing it? And I anticipated some of that when I was like, we're going to move to QualiBuild, and I moved some of our systems in the middle of a fiscal year. I am also not a financial person. I'm not an accountant. And I knew that gave some of my staff some pause and concern, like, why are you not waiting until June to do this? But as soon as they saw the quality of the submissions we were getting, how easy it is for them to review and approve or send it back, that sort of concern of like, this is new, didn't last very long, maybe a week.
That's great.
And we've since onboarded new staff that have had no challenge for picking that up. And I think we're now in the place of thinking of what other systems do we have in other places that we need to move to be into QualiBuild to be consistent, so that we're only using really one system. And I think we've reached a place where we're not making major tweaks to any of our forms. We're just duplicating them for the next fiscal year, and that feels really good.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Do you feel like it's changed the way people collaborate on your team?
Yes. So I have the ability also to maintain groups. Our IT staff at UConn has been really, really great. At the beginning, I would be sending them lists of students to add into these different groups. And unlike staff, students in their student leadership positions are fairly transient. They turn over at least once a year, if not multiple times a year. And our IT folks were like, why don't we give you the ability to manage your own groups? You can add students into these roles and different things. And that's been really great. And we have, in our workflow process, there's really never a step that only is assigned to one person. We have groups and we have backups. And so, I have a team of financial assistants. There's 4 folks amongst themselves. They decide who's doing the initial review on one day, and they switch off depending on the day of the week. But having that backup and that duplication, if somebody's out sick or is on vacation, takes time off, there's somebody in there who can it's also in their action list. They just go in and review it. I don't have to reassign a whole bunch of things, or we don't have to pull something from someone's computer to be able to send to other folks. So that sense of backup, I think, has been really great and allowed the staff to work together as a team to decide who's doing what. Everyone backs each other up, but this is the thing I feel really comfortable with, so I'll take more days doing this. Has allowed the team to do that. And obviously I work within a larger department. I'm one area in a larger department. And all of our staff, we're at the point now where we're moving a lot of our systems into QualiBuild. So there's a chance to work across the department with folks who are really comfortable with QualiBuild, helping folks who are not as comfortable yet get into this space, showing folks how things work. And we've collaborated with our folks in public safety who are trying to build a similar form for purchases. So there's an opportunity in there to share all that knowledge as well.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that. I know there was a particular form that you had wanted to kind of share as an example, just of something that you've automated, and I thought I might go ahead and share that, which I will do after a brief awkward moment where I get that working. Okay. All right, so tell us a little bit about this form, kind of how it fits into your processes, what you're trying to solve with this form.
Right. So this is a view of the main purchase request form I was talking about. We have a similar naming convention for all of our forms that makes it easy for our students to find it. And since this is our second year doing it, we've added, this is for fiscal year 24. We had some things in 23 that students needed to finalize late in the fiscal year, start of a new one. So this is how they find them. There's, again, like I mentioned, there's required questions that you can't move on unless you've completed these things. These are important things for us to know and to track. This is just a quick screenshot. There's multiple pages. So, that question that says, which of the following apply to this purchase, based on what you pick, multiple other sections show up that allows the student to put in the specific information we need. There's drop downs for the organization. This is how we track, which group it is. And we don't have to deal with them typing in the organization, capitalizing once, but not another time. This really helps standardize those things. And it walks them through kind of the whole process for them to submit before it goes to my staff for a quick review, and then to their org's president and treasurer to confirm that this is actually something the group wants to pay for. And we've used, so obviously everyone is using the same form and standardized it. And we've been able to then from the documents view, which I think is, if you move to the next one, again, some standard questions. And if you're using QualiBuild, you have the opportunity to build multiple different types of views. I have a one that, when I'm just looking to review or I'm looking up something, this is my favorite way. This one right here is not, but there's a favorite way that I use to look at those things. I've saved it as, Krista's favorite or Krista's default. But this particular view here is our export view. And once a week I go in, I pull this view and I download this current information every single week. And I get an Excel spreadsheet that has just the columns I need, not the entire form. I didn't even know Excel could go that far out in terms of columns. These are just the ones I need. And I get this Excel spreadsheet. So if you click, again, this gives me an Excel spreadsheet of every purchase request and the status of those requests, as well as how much we think this request is going to cost. And if I downloaded this into Excel, we save it in a shared OneDrive. UConn is a Microsoft campus, so we have OneDrive that allows folks when they're in the office or telecommuting to be able to access all of the same things. So this lives in a shared OneDrive. And then I was able to build group budget spreadsheets. And so this actually filters from that initial export from QualiBuild. What are the things that are actually the graduate student senates, and what expense category are these? This is really important for the groups at a moment's notice, on a Saturday or on a Wednesday at 8 p.m. to know how much money do they have available to them and in what categories to spend without needing staff to be there and to do it. Before we were using QualiBuild from a bookkeeping, from accounting perspective, we were using QuickBooks, which our staff are really great at. Our staff are bookkeeping, accounting folks, they know how to use QuickBooks. Our students did not. And as much as we might teach them when they become the treasurer, this is how you're using QuickBooks, we learned over a number of years, they just weren't doing the bookkeeping. It was overwhelming to them, too much of a learning curve. So they just kept putting it off and putting it off. And when they'd have to do their annual budget presentations for the entire university, my staff was spending weeks recreating books for them so that they could have accurate information. Last year, I was like, you don't know how to use QuickBooks. Why don't you try just using an Excel spreadsheet and manually enter each of these expenses? They weren't doing that either. Even though they all know how to use Excel, the time it took for them to just type some numbers, it was like the least important thing to them. They, again, kept putting it off. Some groups were good about it, but the majority of them were not. And so this summer, I standardized the whole thing. There's really nothing the groups need to do. Everything it's automatic for them. Once a week, we do these downloads. Moving forward, we'll probably do it multiple times a week. And they can see how much money have they already spent, how much money have they promised but haven't spent yet, how much money is really available to them at that given point in time. Their annual budget presentations are in February of this year. February 2024, and they're all far more prepared at this point than in the last 7 years I've supported these groups, because they can see and are regularly checking in on how much are they actually spending. Our students are great and really talented, but for most of them, if not all of them, this is the first time they're managing $1 million businesses, little businesses, right? And they're responsible for doing this. And it's a big learning curve for some students who are also going to go off and do great things, but the most we can support them to do that work well and to be good stewards of the money they have, that's our job, right? So these budget spreadsheets have been great. There would have been no way for me to figure out how to do this in the other platforms we were using, definitely not when we were using paper. I mean, that would have been a significant amount of staff time manually entering these things. So.
Right, creating. Oh, thanks for sharing that. We do have a question that I think is kind of relevant to what you were just sharing, but it's maybe something I'll take up. It's the question is, are you able to get all of the data out programmatically rather than in Excel? And I realize that for you, the quick export to CSV is the right choice for you and what you need. Bill also has a full suite of APIs, so that if the desire is to pull data out programmatically, that is certainly an option. It just wasn't what you needed in that moment. Thank you for that question. Wonderful. My question for you now is, what type did you hit any challenges? Were there challenges in the role? We're talking about a lot of the great things. It sounds like there's been a lot of transformation. Anything that was a challenge?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, I am not a bookkeeper or accounting. I came to this work from a student organization management perspective, and I am actually not one of the people who does any of the purchasing. I review for policy compliance, and I have like I said, a staff of financial folks who do all the purchases, know better than I do what's needed for our systems to really purchase. I think the biggest challenge was really just for myself, getting a full understanding of what our process was from A to Z, and really learning exactly what we need and what we were collecting that we didn't need and we can get rid of, and really walking my staff through, okay, so we're used to seeing this, but if it looks like this, just a text field, is that okay? Like we can get to that place to moving those things. One of our biggest challenges is our students want to use different vendors than we can really use through our university systems. And sometimes we can use Amazon and buy things from Amazon. And students would be sending us screenshots of the carts that they wanted. And our staff would, again, be spending time searching Amazon, looking for that exact product. We've been able to now just have students share a shopping list with us, like a shopping cart or a wish list from Amazon, and just copy and paste the URL right into this form. So all my staff have to do once it's been approved and they can purchase is click on that link and add all those things to their cart to buy. And that's been really great. I think there are a handful of things that we're still sort of challenges for us, mostly related to our funding of the other student organizations, the funding request forms that our student government groups use, and really getting those to a place where our staff feel really comfortable with them. It's mostly convincing the students that think they own these forms, that we know what the process really should look like from beginning to end, and navigating that sense of control they want to have over the forms. And I have a long, not super long, but a short list, I think, of asks that would make our life a little bit easier in building the forms. But I like every week I log in and there's something new in Koali Build that, like, I'm waiting for winter break to test out those conditional permissions for my forms, because I actually think those are going to be really great for our groups. Winter break is the time to test some of those things. Yeah,
that's great. Great, thanks. Well, let's turn to the future. Do you have future plans for other processes that you might automate? And maybe you feel like you've done it, you've got them, the key ones are in place.
Yeah, I think the key ones that we use are in place. I think it's now at a point of talking to our student organizations and figuring out, like, what are the systems that they've put in place to manage other things. They have some internal, I know our undergraduate student government has a communications department. That's their job, is to sort of, all of our organizations have marketing for Instagram and making posters for campus and being on Snapchat and TikTok, and they're creating Google Forms and things like that to kind of manage those, that I think could be better done in Koali Build. Some of the challenges is I put in a submission for an Instagram post, but I have no idea when it's actually going to go live. And that to me is the workflow process that Koali Build can offer that they don't currently have. One of my other roles in student activities is to manage our department's assessment procedures and processes. So our staff are doing really great work, and we are positively impacting students' learning on campus. We do some assessment of our learning outcomes, the effectiveness of our programs, and we have used different systems to do that. That's my next thing to move into Koali Build, a similar assessment kind of intake process and review process for our department committee. What we have isn't broken, but we've moved a lot of other things as a department into Koali Build, including our human resources department. We use it for our own leave requests and telecommuting and flex schedule requests. So I think moving away from some of the other systems we've used is going to be great for consistency.
Oh, that's great, Krista. Thanks. What lessons have you learned, and what advice would you give to other departments or other folks out there looking to make a similar kind of transition?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the opportunity that our IT department gave me to just get into the system and play around. I think I said at the beginning, like, I think student activities is really important to a college experience, and obviously to the students. It's not always the highest on the priority list for getting projects done through the centralized offices, and in the grand scheme, it's not as important as a health and wellness intake form or tracking students on probation who are struggling academically. So the ability to be able to manage my own forms myself and get in there as someone who knows the system, the process that we need the best, and have the resources I can go to and say, like, I think you told me that the Koali build can do this. It can look up a different form, and how do I do that? And then have them walk me through how to do that as the experts on, the development and the IT, the process. That's been really great. And so I think, I don't think it's as challenging or as scary as it might look to someone opening it for the first time. Because even if some of the language is different than what you're used to, a gadget versus a field, like once you get in there, I think it's a lot easier to understand than you might anticipate as someone with no development background, didn't take a single class in coding or anything like that. Like, I'm still able to build a form and a whole process that I think works really well.
Oh, that's so great, right? You started with your whiteboard and your marker, and before you knew it, you had a process and a workflow. That is excellent. Thank you so much for kind of sharing that transformation. Really great story. And you really brought back to some great memories for me about just being in college and the student experience and what that's like. What a great area that you're working in. Paul, I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions, and just give folks a minute to type a question into the QA if you'd like to. And if not, we'll go ahead and conclude. I do see a question about whether we're able to apply CSS styling to the forms, and I actually don't know the answer to that question. Happy to follow up. I think that isn't something that has come up in my experience frequently, so I'm not able to answer that one.
I don't even know what that means. So sad. So
you haven't needed to do it.
That's great. To do it.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and share once more with a couple of things to wrap up with. Give me just a moment. We talked a little bit at the beginning, or I talked a little bit in the beginning about our focus on community, and one of the most important ways that manifests itself is in our annual user event called Koali Days, which is taking place in 2024 in April in Long Beach. It's a wonderful user conference and opportunity for folks to hear from their peer schools about all the fun, innovative things that they're doing with our products and the problems they're solving, similar to the things that Krista has shared today. Updates from Koali about what's new and what's coming, and just a lot of wonderful sharing and networking and great energy. So if you have never had a chance to come to Koali Days, or if you have, put that on your calendar. Thank you. If you're interested in learning more about Koali Build, you can access this site or scan this QR code, and it'll get you connected with some more information, or you can reach out directly to one of our sales reps. Liz in particular is happy to take your questions. And really, I just want to say thank you, Krista. You have been terrific. I love hearing about your experience with student success, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm really glad we're not dealing in paper. So thanks for the solution to that problem.
It's our pleasure. We're glad to help you reduce paper. That is fantastic. Well, thank you. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining, and be on the lookout for more entries in our webinar series. Thanks, everybody.